there's a lot of loneliness. There's a lot of desperation and disconnection. What do you think your roles are as priests, as nourishers of the spiritual self, are now in 2025?
I think it's about creating a community that is open and inclusive and safe and brave for anyone to come into. It needs to be healthy. And sadly, we hear often on the news about faith communities that are not, clearly are not, and are causing harm to people. And we need to make sure that we are holding people tenderly, that we are embracing everyone, and that we walk with people and value them for who they are, not in spite of who they are,
Yes.
for who they are.
I think one of the things that we really need to do to be able to accomplish that is to really broaden our own perspectives on spiritual practices. So not just say, come and worship out of this book and sing these hymns out of this book at this particular time like we always have in this space, but encouraging people to pray contemplatively, which just means silent prayer, or to walk a labyrinth, or to meditate. And as spiritual people, spiritual leaders, to embrace that broad spectrum of practice and to try to host it, encourage it. And I think by doing that, we can build relationship with people who do have concerns or just absolutely cannot get over the barriers that would lead them into a worshiping community. But we can still be part of that spiritual journey of theirs, especially if they've never, experienced that before. They don't know how to do that. So creating a space that is safe, and also being, I think it was Lisa Miller says in her book, we can be trail angels and trail guides for people to be able to walk that journey and learn how to do that. That will help them, whether it helps, the church or not, isn't our number one priority. It's helping them to be as fully connected to the divine as they can be.
There's a part in the book where she takes them. She's working at a mental institute as a young physician. She's still completing her doctorate, and she's working with patients who are schizophrenic and really suffering, and she takes them through a religious practice, a Jewish practice. What did you think when you were reading that?
I loved it. It illuminated something that I have known intuitively, and she put words and meat to it. So there was some upset on that ward because there was to be no recognition of Yom Kippur, which is the most important holiday in the Jewish calendar. And so she got her grandmother's prayer book, and she did her best to lead a service. And what she found was that people who often isolated themselves, would sit staring at the wall, didn't want to have any social interaction, were participating fully. It was like the light had come on for them. And in fact, some of them began taking on leadership roles.
Yes.
And they knew the words, and they got involved, and they were chanting. And their mental health, you could see that it was being nourished, that they were growing towards wholeness. And I think that ritual and prayer has that ability. I see that when I go into long-term care homes.
Yes.
And people that might have been, even appearing as if they were asleep. You start singing a hymn and they perk up, and often they know all the words. It is beautiful.
There's something about the ritual that seems to immediately connect you with being sacred and being held is what I got from that chapter was that the people in that group started to feel like they were seen.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
It was also, and this is what Lisa will talk about later in that book, after a lot of time spent with people and a lot of research. But this was that innate spiritual part of those people that had been suppressed in that environment. And now they were able to make that connection. And it was like, okay, we've taken care of their physical needs. They're fed, they're housed. When they're really struggling, we give them medication, which makes them feel better, or at least they don't feel as bad. We look after other aspects of who they are, but we weren't looking after that spiritual part, and we weren't even allowing them to engage in that spiritual part. And now they're able to be fully human. And so I agree with what you said about ritual. These were people, obviously, who had experienced, most of them had experienced that ritual before. So there was I get a chance to live out something. And we see this in church all the time, where people, many years ago, decades ago, they learned a certain ritual, and when they get a chance to, it just sort of comes back to them. It could be that they haven't done it in years, but it just comes back to them. I think that's part of it, but I really think the rest of it is just they actually had a chance to live out their spirituality, and they had not had that, and that is what brought them to full life in that moment, and allowed them to do things and say things that they were otherwise, or at least they believed they weren't allowed to in that environment. So, yeah.
And so, back to the earlier question about, has your work as faith leaders, changed as we've emerged out of this very transformational time? Like, does what you do, does that become like the teaching of a practice so that people can understand that they are spiritual beings, whether they're in the church or outside of the church?
The short answer is yes. I think we need to be very intentional about that. I think we need to help people to have safe opportunities to engage with spiritual practices and with spiritual communities. I don't think it is reasonable to expect people to just show up surprise on a Sunday morning. That's a scary thing to do for many people.
Yes.
So I think it's about offering more in the community or safe access points into the church building and into things that are going on within the church, like, I don't know, an Earth Day celebration or an open mic night or a meditation group. I think that's important. But it also occurred to me as you were asking that question that in terms of our ministry, a lot has changed. For example, 5 years ago, we weren't doing a podcast. We weren't using Zoom.
No, that's
we
right.
weren't live streaming our services.
No.
So we've had to learn how to connect with people through technology as well. And I think that's been an important thing.
Yes, I just think we've got to continue to be creative and open to all sorts of new possibilities in terms of practices, in terms of environment. I can just say, as church leaders, we do that while we continue to nurture people who want to continue with the rituals that they've always experienced, and don't want to see change and don't want to see difference, but still help them to connect spiritually and to grow spiritually. Now, one of the ways we do that is what we're talking about today is the kind of message we would be sharing with those same people. So they might still be praying the same prayers, they might still be singing the same hymns, but we're giving them a different message. And we're hoping it's a message that will lead them to a deeper spiritual connection with the divine. And also, when they're out in the world outside of the church, they're embracing that and encouraging other people to do that as well.
Is there a gospel that you could think about today that's speaking to you right now, just speaking to your heart right now this week, is there anything that you could share with us, like about a way to contemplate what we may be experiencing if we're in a place of, darkness or sadness, or feeling defeated, or experiencing rejection? Where would we enter a gospel story today?
So there's a passage in John's Gospel in chapter 10 where Jesus talks about the fact that he is a shepherd, and his sheep hear his voice, and it's this beautiful, intimate exchange where he talks about the relationship that he has with his followers. And I think that is an important thing, particularly as we approach Mother's Day, because I see this nurturing presence in that. And so often people think of God as being distant and punitive and very patriarchal and even harsh.
Yes.
And yet there are so many examples in our scriptures of the Divine One being gentle, being like a mother hen, being very nurturing. And to me, it reminds me of Saint Bridget, who is the mother saint of Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
But she was a shepherdess in her young years. And she's often depicted in pictures of having a shepherd's crook, although it looks a lot more like a bishop's crozier, because, she was the founder of a number of religious communities and considered to be a sort of episcopal abbess.
Yes.
But she was tender, and she was caring, and she was inclusive. And I think at a time where trans people are feeling very much under threat, where refugees are being dismissed or treated with hatred even, that we need to remember that at our core, we are to be nurturing.
Mm-hmm.
We are to be like those gentle, protective shepherds who take care of their flock. And I think we are called to take care of each other.
It's a very powerful commentary in a period of time when there is a lot of division. Like we're in a period of time, not just in the world, but here in Canada, where I don't know that I've ever seen this vocal amount of tension, where we are not even able to talk to each other. And I wonder about the role of the church, of faith, even though people question faith and they're suspicious about religious organizations, and at the same time adoring, it kind of, there's this back and forth, but not really understanding that maybe faith has a role here, not political, right? Like 800 years ago, but in the meditating of our minds, of our hearts, of the softening of our ideas and notions of each other.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that there's a question.
But that's political too, isn't it? Because if we can soften people's hearts, people will elect different leaders.
Right.
One of the things that I found very encouraging in the most recent federal election campaign was words like, we need to take care of each other. We need to look after each other. What I think we've been going through for a while now, and this is just structurally in community and our society, is some really significant change. Definitely during the pandemic, people really felt that. In churches, we've been really feeling that. And in every case, when that happens, people are afraid. There's deep fear. And when that happens, we tend to see division, tribalism, polarization. And I think certainly as spiritual leaders, as church leaders, and as churches, I think our greatest role is for us to help people get through the fear and alleviate that fear and know. So one of the things that Lisa, I'm so glad she recognizes it very early in her time of study of people and her research is we are not alone. So when people feel like they're isolated, they're alone, they're, and I think that happened a lot for a lot of people during the pandemic, especially when people were locked down, you're not alone. And for us as spiritual leaders, we need to make sure people realize that they're not alone. Now, they're not alone because the divine walks with them all the time, but we also need to be present for them so that they know that they're not alone. We are also there for them as individuals, as community. And I think that is something that we can do that would be very helpful to people in the world.